one of these cases that drew some attention when the crime occurred, but of course, people's memories are limited, and particularly with the volume of violent crime in places like Chicago. But there was a sentence handed down in a attempted sexual assault and beating of a young woman who was attacked when she was walking home from a bar in the West Loop. The 26-year-old pleaded guilty to kidnapping by force of threat in exchange for a 5-year sentence this week. 5 years. Pleading out, dropping felonies, including 2 counts of aggravated battery in order to strike this plea deal. Here's what happened. Walking home after drinking at a West Loop bar with a friend, she noticed a man sitting in a car near a stop sign, realized he had begun following her on foot, even across the street when she did. Caught up with her, grabbed her from behind until she screamed and ran away, but he chased her, dragged her into a construction site in the 400 block of North Morgan, threw her to the ground while threatening to kill her, pinned the woman to the ground behind a bulldozer, put his hands on her mouth to muffle her screams. When the woman bit his hand, he punched in the face 3 times while hovering over her. Eventually, and thankfully, she was able to free herself and ran from the site, flagged down a motorist who allowed her to get in the car, called 911, so on and so forth. He was ultimately arrested, and 2 years later, he's been sentenced to 5 years in prison, so he'll be out in three and a half, maybe.
Maybe placed on electronic monitoring earlier.
Well, here's the thing about it in Chicago and just generally in life that we say all the time when we talk about crime is that you can listen to the politicians talk public safety all you want, but ultimately, whether you want to confront this reality or not, it's very likely that you will be made responsible for the provision of your own personal safety. And it's more likely in places where prosecutors and politicians, and I repeat myself, have turned the city over to the lawless, to the predators, like this guy I'm describing. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Kerry Sloane. She's the Executive Director for Education at the Crime Prevention Research Center and founder of We the Female, a nonprofit organization created to empower and provide personal security and firearm safety education to women. Kerry, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It seems like I know you wrote recently about domestic violence and protective orders, but it seems like even something as simple as this, where you have a young woman walking home from a bar in the West Loop, and thanks not to the local politicians, but to the Supreme Court, in Illinois, she can get her concealed carry license. She can train so that she's comfortable being able to protect herself if she's forced to. And in this instance, you're not always going to have time, but she had time because she noticed this guy eye-spying her, then following her, and it could have been something as simple as turning on him and brandishing her weapon and saying, "Get away from me," that would have prevented this.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the ideal situation, right, that she is in a position legally to be able to protect herself with a firearm. She's able to draw that weapon, and it scares the predator off, which does happen often. It happened to me, actually, in Seattle once.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, I had to draw my firearm sitting in my car, and it scared the crazy homeless guy off. And but at the end of the day, it's also important to understand that you really don't know if you're ready until you're ready. Mm-hmm. And I didn't until after that situation, and I thought, oh my gosh, I would have taken care of that situation. Which is why we train and why we prepare so that we don't freeze in those situations. And again, that being the ideal position, but brandishing in itself that can catch charges for somebody. Somebody can catch charges just simply for that, especially in a place like Chicago.
Well, right. I mean, this is obviously the flip side, and we talk about this all the time, just among friends. I'm talking about guys. It's like, I don't want to go to the city because I'm ready to do it if I had to do it.
Yeah.
But you don't want to do it.
But I don't want to be in that position because I'm going to be the loser in that. Because whatever, white guy with a gun in this political climate is going to be the enemy, and yeah, unless you have eyewitnesses or it's videoed and so on and so forth. But if it's a he said in a violent confrontation, depending on all sorts of political factors, if you will, you can be on the wrong end of that. So why even put myself in that situation? I'm just staying out of the city, but obviously some people can't do that.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that we've been put in a position that that's where we are, especially for women. That are, we as women are disproportionately affected by those types of laws and gun control laws in particular because we are physically smaller. I'm no biologist, but last I checked, physically we can't match men. Although I do know a few exceptions. For the most part, we're not capable. So a firearm.
Amy's a real ass kicker over here. She can take some men apart.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. I just met a woman in Brazil that was no joke. So, I mean, somebody, it can happen, but as a general rule, women are not physically capable of matching a man's strength, especially if they're angry, on drugs or what have you, anything that gives them that superpower strength, I call it. And a firearm is truly the best way for a woman to level the playing field to be able to defend herself.
Yeah, but why aren't female victims of domestic violence told this?
That's a great question. Being a domestic violence victim myself, when I sat in my abuser's arraignment, and afterward, after the arraignment was over, and I was talking to the sheriff with literally black and blue fingerprints around my throat where he'd picked me up and thrown me across the room, they looked at me and asked me if I had a place to hide for 4 or 5 days, and I was confused by that. And I said, well, yes, but why? And they said, because the chances of violence escalating after, clearly it's my fault he went to jail, because I called and put him in jail. That's their mentality, abuser mentality. The chances of violence escalating is going to be greater. So therefore, they wanted me to hide. Nowhere did they tell me in any capacity to take, the opportunity to learn how to defend myself.
Wow.
I'm so sorry.
And
did he come after you, or did you hide?
He stalked me afterward. I had the sociopathic type abuser where he was able to manipulate the system and blamed me for having to take a second job as a pizza delivery driver, which conveniently happened to be his delivery area was where I owned a condo, so that he could watch my movement.
And so is that what motivated you to get involved with start this nonprofit in particular, but get involved with crime prevention generally?
For me personally, yes, that was what helped me realize that nobody was going to be able to defend me but me, and that I was on my own, and that clearly, even in the best case, even if I'd had the ideal situation, support from law enforcement, they were never going to get there on time. It took them over 10 minutes to get to me when the sheriff's department was less than 2 minutes away. So that was the aha for me. But getting into this as an advocate and an educator, that started after laws were passed in Washington State that would make it even harder for a domestic abuse victim to be able to obtain a firearm to defend herself.
And and in terms of like not being advised by law enforcement, you may want to think about if you don't already have a gun, or you haven't already been licensed in the Illinois context and feel comfortable using a gun to protect yourself, you may want to think about that. The reason that that is not said, you think, when women get protective orders or in situations like yours, is what, just the politics of it, even with law enforcement?
I think so. At the end of the day, the two biggest pawns for gun control are children and domestic abuse victims. We see that, in proposed legislation all the time, red flag laws being a big one, Violence Against Women Act, and so on. And, at the end of the day, politicians can't exert control or profit from survivors.
When you train women on personal security, firearm safety, what are the biggest hurdles that you think people need to get over? I mean, like the hurdle to come and pursue this in the first place, and then the hurdle when they're going through training, such that they can, if they do it successfully and then get to a comfort level, they can be ambassadors for other women to do the same.
Sure. We have a saying in my organization, particularly because we focus on abuse victims and survivors like myself, is that sometimes we have to help women understand their lives are worth saving before we can teach them how to save them. And oftentimes, there's on the conservative leaning side of this, there's always the argument or that, facts over feelings. Well, that's actually not true. Particularly when you're dealing with women, the most effective way that I have found to metaphorically push that button for women to realize they need to defend themselves is to touch them emotionally. We're emotional creatures, women, and when they realize how this could affect them personally, or more importantly, how learning to defend themselves can help them protect their babies. Now we have a personal reason why women want to embrace self-defense, and that's when we can really see the change in them, and as well as becoming advocates for self-defense.
Well, and I assume, your story and perhaps the stories of other people who've either defended themselves in a hairy situation or were victims and then, got prepared to provide for their personal safety. I assume those stories are powerful too, in terms of persuasive capacity.
Yes, I'm very open about sharing my story. A lot of women aren't, and it's unfortunate. So I find that the more I get out and share my story, I encourage the next woman to, and then she encourages the next woman to, and it has that chain reaction. But women are scared too for all kinds of reasons, and sometimes it's simply the fact that they're still being stalked or having to deal with their ex or their abuser in some capacity, and that keeps them quiet so that they don't have to deal with the repercussions, unfortunately.
All right. She is Kerry Sloane, Executive Director for Education at the Crime Prevention Research Center, founder of We the Female, which is a nonprofit that was created to both empower and provide personal security and firearm safety education to women. More information on We the Female at wethefemale.net. That's the website, right? wethefemale.net?
Yes, it is.
All right. wethefemale.net. Kerry Sloane. Thanks so much for joining us, Kerry. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When this is the sound of a waterfall in nature, there's no cause for concern. But when it's the sound of water gushing through your living room ceiling because a pipe bursts inside the wall, there's reason to panic unless you pick up the phone and call 1-800-SERVPRO. Only the cleanup and restoration specialists at ServPro can help make fire and water damage like it never even happened. So make the call to 1-800-SERVPRO at the first sign of water damage. Franchises are independently owned and operated.
Hi, I'm Test Director Rick from ServPro, the leader in cleaning, restoration, and construction. It's my job to make sure our pros are prepared for anything. Storm damage? Fixed. Flood damage? We're on it. Fire damage? Not anymore. Aliens? What? Aliens? We cleaned those sites a while ago. No matter the disaster, our pros will make it like it never even happened. Find out why ServPro is the #1 choice for residential and commercial restoration projects large and small. Visit servpro.com today.
Are you a business owner with a strategic mission, a drive to succeed, and a plan for growth, but you just need the right bank? Hi, Mike Gallagher here, letting you know that Signature Bank is all about going the distance for commercial banking customers. It's what Signature Bank does every day. Their team understands that accessibility is key to their culture. In times like these, you want a bank that is there